Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Shred Your Halo in this very sober and concerning times with the coronavirus outbreak. We hope to bring to you some important content that is not completely based on the health crises around the world. So, hopefully, we give you a little bit of hope, maybe a little bit of laughter, uplift your spirit while educating you on the various nuances of love. So, this is going to be the second part of our topic, all about love, all about romance. And I welcome my panelists, Abhishek Subash and Jharna Kannan. Yay! Hello, you guys.
All right, I'm going to call it the quarantine special.
And it is so incredible, isn't it? And I thought it's very fitting to continue with the last point you made when we finished the first part of our topic, when you talked about boredom. Now, enforced boredom, isn't it? This is what we are all talking about. We're talking about loneliness. We're talking about boredom. We're talking about the very things we've been consistently distracting ourselves from. We've been talking about relationships which are going to either implode or going to flourish as a result of two people having to face each other under under one roof for a very long time. So I want you to elaborate on boredom, the really striking topic that you brought into the conversation at the very tail end of the video. Thank you very much, Abhi. So, what did you mean by a healthy relationship should be boring? I'm
Okay,
paraphrasing, of course, but
I,
yeah.
yeah, I feel like since children we've been told that you shouldn't be boring, you shouldn't be interesting. So I think the word boring, boredom, has got such negative connotations, and people just stay away from boring and boredom. Because boring person or a boring situation. Oh my God, nobody wants to be there. But think about it. Um, People in these quarantine times you're lonely. You're being with yourself, and you're finding it boring. Why are you finding yourself boring? So essentially, all this while, what was happening then? Were you running away from yourself because you couldn't handle yourself?
Yes.
So I don't know what is that. I think people should need to think about it right now. So in the similar vein, a relationship, um, people are trying to spice it up and do things to keep it exciting. Why are you keeping it exciting? Because if you're not keeping it exciting, then probably you all will leave each other. Isn't
Hmm.
that the truth? And if it were boring, well, what? It's great. You're going to be still together. This is you. This is your other. This is your partner, and you are boring. So boring in terms of a relationship is. I feel like I also said last time. It's probably doing the same thing over and over again, right? Like you as a couple doing the same things over and over again, doing your same laughter over and over again, doing your same chores over and over again, doing your fitness over and over again, doing your cuddles over and over again. And what is not great about it? I don't get it. Isn't that what we all aspire for? To have this kind of a relationship where you keep doing the things with your partner, and probably it lasts, keep doing these things till eternity. So why suddenly it's not meant to be? So yeah.
Hmm. What
And
about? Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead, Abhi.
so that's my thing. I think boring, your relationship should be boring. If you're looking for excitement and spicing up your relationship, I think you all should go to a counselor, get therapy, or both of you all sit down, just thrash out the truth. Don't try to become a couple.
I like I was thinking from what I kind of understand from what you're saying is we shouldn't be afraid of appearing boring to other people and have a very happy relationship inside, like cuddles and the same conversations, having our own uplifting routines, right? So if it's about being uplifting for just the two of us, I witness you, you witness me, and we are having a good life, as opposed to ta-da, this grand production that has to look exciting to everybody else. Isn't that what you're saying, Abhi?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I understand now. What about you, Jharna? What are your thoughts on this?
I think for me, when we say boring, I assume boring means predictable relationships, which is extremely necessary because unpredictability is too much for our biology itself. It's just too much to handle. And imagine you want excitement and drama all the time in your life. What is going to happen to your nervous system? I mean, you'll feel like you're electrified, like getting electrocuted all the time. So I've had enough of drama and not knowing where my life is headed and that unpredictability, and it doesn't feel good. It's important to know where you stand with the other person, what you're doing with each other, that both of you know you're on the same page. So for me, when we talk about being boring in a relationship, it's knowing exactly where you stand in the other person's life and where that person stands in your life. Because when you know that you have a solid foundation, it becomes so much more easy to look into other things that you can put your heart into, that you can put your effort into. So why would you want to change something that simple, that solid, for so much drama, and then you're always second guessing what your relationship status is, which is very unhealthy, and it makes us feel unsafe. So boring all the way, absolutely.
You know, my heart just started beating so fast as you were talking, Jarna, especially because in my last relationship, this guy would constantly keep me on tenterhooks. He would withhold his I don't know, his affections, maybe his approval. And I didn't realize how much power he wielded in his own uncertainty. The relationship is going to be only as strong as the weakest person, and he was the weakest person in the relationship. And it doesn't matter how much I poured into the relationship, he was just taking, he was withdrawing from that energy bank and not giving anything in return. And in the rare occasion that he did, it would be such a flutter of excitement. And I was always feeling so sick in the relationship. And thank you for bringing this incredibly important point that in a healthy relationship, nobody is left guessing about where you stand in the other person's heart, what the relationship means to the other. Your schedules are not left up to chance. You are making plans for each other. You know what you're going to do every single day, what your future looks like together. And it's always the abusers who withhold it, who withhold that kind of information, because keeping the other person untethered and guessing is where they have the power. So thank you. I have to say, I'm very shook by what you said. We need to know. We need to have a predictable human being in our lives. Thank you, Jharna, for that incredibly amazing point. Yes. I'd like to add a little bit to what Abhi and what you said. You know, there was this social experiment that was done many years ago where a mother and her child were brought into this nursery, and the social scientists were standing behind a one-way glass. The child and the mother couldn't see them. They were watching the child. As long as the mother was with the child would go further and further and explore further, newer and newer things, turn back, look and make sure that the mother was there, and the child was braver as a result of. Remove the mother from the equation, and the child never moved. So we need, like Jharna said, we need the predictability of having somebody's solid love backing us. That love doesn't have to be, and I always tell you guys, excitement is feels so toxic to me. Spontaneity feels so toxic to me. If somebody screams with excitement, and I used to, of course, like the two of you as well, used to interpret that as happiness, and I'd need so much of time to recover from that happiness. So excitement is actually quite toxic to the human nervous system, like Jana very rightly said. Spontaneity is extremely toxic to our system. So, what we need to do is have a person whose love for us is solid, is backing us, and because of that love, we are able to expand ourselves and be better versions of ourselves. And likewise, the other person. And this love, this solidity of the relationship is, like Abhi said, it's boring. It can't be a dozen roses. It can't be a spontaneous trip to Rome. Well, clearly not Italy anytime in the foreseeable future, but right? It can't be like random, exciting things all the time. I'm sorry, it's Chaplin, my dog. Um, so that I think this is such an important basis, the ability to embrace boredom. And if we don't accept that for one section of humanity, we'd be like utterly boring. So some people will find us really exciting, right? But we can't cater to everybody. We have to make peace with the fact that we're only a few people's cup of tea, right? So once we embrace our boredom is only when we can accept boredom in another person, don't you think? How far are you in the journey of accepting that your boredom, your boringness, shall we say, Abhi?
Pretty well.
Oh, well
I
done.
I've been on solo trips so many times till now and never ever got bored.
Right.
Uh,
And
and
it's not like you're doing these extraordinarily exciting, adventurous things, right? You're just keeping yourself company.
yes, and uh, just I don't know, and I've always been asked, how do you go on a solo trip and don't feel bored? But and that's the whole point. I don't feel bored because I think I love my company. So
Yeah.
yeah, so pretty well, I must say.
What about you, Jarna? How are you handling your boringness?
I think everybody knows that I'm a boring person, which I don't have to explain now. And earlier, I remember a lot of people would be like, "Oh, why aren't you talking to me? Why aren't you making conversation? Why aren't you socializing with people?" And I think that was the time when I was trying to be a rebel and say that I'm a boring person. I think the minute I accepted it, people stopped questioning me. So
The
there are
irony
so
of
many
life.
times that I am hanging out with a group of people. I don't open my mouth. I don't talk to them. I'm mostly just listening to what they have to say. And I am so comfortable not being a verbal contributor. I listen, and that is also a contribution in a conversation. But the minute I accepted that I don't have to speak to be seen or to be heard, it just became very easy for me to just stay there and know that I have the company of the people who are not going to question me as to why I'm not speaking. And I suppose that is one way of coming to a certain point where you've accepted, okay, I'm boring, and yay for me.
Oh my God, that is well done, Jarna. Well done. I think when people resist their boringness is when it's almost like waving a red flag to the bull, isn't it? Like the whole universe can see how boring you are. Now the spotlight is right bang on your boringness. What you said is very true and very important. For me, for the longest time, because of my self-esteem issues, I could not handle being boring to anybody. I constantly needed to be exciting for people. I had to weaponize my good manners and extend conversation and gabbets and openings and get people involved and get into projects because what it did for me is just it just sapped out all my precious irrenewable energy, and in the end I had nothing to show for it except I needed long periods of hibernation to come out of that state. But here's the weird thing, right? Now that I'm doing as much gardening as I am, every single day my plants look different. Every single day they look different. Every single day we are different because we're 24 hours older. We've had experiences. Look at the interesting times we're living in. So if we have our antennas tuned to the subtle but not to the loud, if we are tuned to the subtle, there's always going to be something interesting about the people we love. Every single day, we're going to read something new, we're going to hear something new, we're going to discover something new, some realization is going to happen to us. If nothing, when you're in love, you're going to cuddle with that person you love, like Abhi said in the beginning of the conversation. And that should be enough. You don't hold the person you love hostage to keep you entertained. We have to, like Abhi said, get yourself into therapy if boredom is your biggest enemy. So let's get back into the topic. Today we're going to be handling two questions, time permitting. We're going to ask the questions: what are the characteristic traits that are the biggest relationship assets? I'm going to ask you first, Jharna. What do you think? What are the characteristic traits that are the biggest assets in a relationship?
The first thing is to realize that you are your own person, and the person that you're going to be with is another whole person by themselves. And um, being aware, being self aware is extremely important. And that only comes when you start spending more time with yourself and you know that you're a whole person and you bring that self awareness into that relationship.
Amen.
So, absolutely, absolutely required, because if you don't know who you are, what do you bring to the table? Are you just going to be a replication of the person that you're with? And if you are someone who is not self aware, it is very likely that you will find someone who is a self aware person. So you're basically just ricocheting off of each other and bringing unresolved issues to the table from both your sides, and then you wonder why your relationship is not working. So being self aware is extremely important, and knowing that you're your own person, that's important. Another thing is empathy. Unless you go through your journey, it's very difficult to feel empathy towards another person. Only when you know that there are certain things that you're dealing with and you pay a little bit more attention, a little bit more kindness towards yourself, it's very difficult to extend that to someone else. And if you do extend that to someone else from a place of lack, it's usually because you're trying to resolve your issues through the other person, not because you're actually willingly looking at your wounds and saying, I'm going to work on healing myself. So, these are a few things. And another thing is being willing to look at things through the other person's point of view also, because we are very limited in our point of view, and there will always be another perspective that will show you something different. It'll challenge you, sometimes frustrate you, but the willingness to be open to another person's point of view is important. Otherwise, what is the point of a relationship at all? We can just be autonomous by ourselves and not have anybody in our lives. So a relationship is, of course, it's a mirror, because it's going to show you things that you like or show you things that you want, but also at the same time it's going to show you things that you do not like about yourselves. And that is the time you really need to question why, instead of running away and saying, oh, you know what, I've had issues with this person, I'm going to leave him. and I'm going to go find another person and then leave him and then go and find another person and then leave him, because that is just going to be a cycle that keeps happening. So it's very important to be open to the idea that somebody else can think, feel, react differently from you. And only if you feel confident enough or sure of yourself, who you are as a person, you will be able to open up yourself to that perspective coming from somebody else. So I think these are a few things that are very necessary, and I consider them some of the biggest assets in a relationship.
Absolute vulnerability within yourself and to your partner, isn't it? Who
Yeah.
would have thought vulnerability is a superpower and so necessary in a relationship? Well, thank you. Well done. Well said, Jharna. What about you, Abhi? What are the characteristic traits that are the biggest relationship assets, according to you?
A few are going to overlap with Jana, but I
Mm-hmm.
think one, I feel being authentic and being yourself is a very important asset to be in to being coupled, to being in a relationship with another person. Another one to and as an asset for a relationship is knowing and setting boundaries. I think many a
Mm-hmm.
times when you are in a relationship, people just take it for granted that the other person is uh, is not having any boundaries, and we can just behave and talk uh, the way we want, which is
Yeah.
not true. Just because probably you said "I love you" to each other, that necessarily hasn't. It's not become a document wherein you can just violate the other person in terms of violate the other person's boundaries. I think so. And this can only happen if you know your own boundaries. You have set your own boundaries. You know yourself as other. You know yourself. You so it's like that. It's like a thing. So you know yourself. You can set boundaries. You can explain your boundaries, and you would want boundaries in a relationship.
Yes.
Otherwise, if you don't know, you wouldn't want it, and that's the whole problem, I think. So that's a very important asset, I think, to have, to know and have setting boundaries. I think it's also a very important asset if you know yourself that you're a work in progress, and so is your partner who is a work in progress, and so you all can healthily accept differences, healthily accept certain mistakes, unless it's terrible, but it can be subjective. So, just knowing your work in progress, and help each other build it, build the work up. Having your own, in fourth point, would be having your own individual goals. So you can have your couple goals, but your couple goals need not be your goals. That's for a reason they're called as couples. So both of y'all can come together and dream about it and work towards it, but you yourself should have your own goal, I think.
Yes.
That will just it will you wouldn't be obsessing about your relationship then, I think.
Yes.
Because you have yourself to obsess about as well if you have your own goals. So yeah, having your own goals. Being another asset will be being open and communicative. So simple, so obvious, but um, I hope during these quarantine times people are being more communicative with each other because they're all cooped up in their homes. So,
Yes.
and another point is to have a relationship. I think it is an asset if you have a relationship between equals. So you and your partner should be equal. If somebody is not on this equal scale, one of y'all is either up or down, it's certainly not going to end well. Um,
Yes.
the superiority inferiority thing, somewhere it's all going to play and it's going to come out. So just to make sure you're having a relationship with the person whom you consider to be equal to you, and that person considers you to be equal to them. So that the last is, I think, to be a cohabitant in a relationship and not a codependent person.
Oh, chills. Okay.
So, yeah, so just inhabit each other, do not be dependent on each other. So, yeah, these are my assets for a
Wow.
relationship.
Well done, Abhi. I've given a little bit of thought to this and I've only put in 3 points and I've just called them independence, spirituality, and having common goals. If I were to elaborate on it, the biggest assets each person can bring into a relationship, the first one would be independent. Each person is an independent person on their own. They are not a projection of their parents. They are not a projection of their traditions. They have discovered themselves in their identity. Their self identity is rock solid. That's what I call by independence. The second type of independence would also be like Abhi said, have your own goals and then have your own life, a life which does not include the other person, your partner. So you can have adventures and stories and growth that is independent of the other person, and then you can come and tell them about it. And your individual growth and that little bit of separation is what is going to give a little bit of spice in your relationship. Um, like Esther Perel says, it is the distance that creates attraction. If you're constantly going to be together, it's not. And independence is one of the biggest, and it's also such a beautiful safety net because if the relationship was to go pear shaped, your independence will give you the strength to your spine to stand up and heal and become whole once again. So it's very, very important to find your own core of independence. The second one is spirituality. Spirituality doesn't necessarily mean going to church, rituals of worship, no, but having a deeper understanding that we are a microcosm of a macrocosm, that there is a power that is bigger than us, that our actions are not just limited to our actions, that there's ripple effects, that we are an important and vital part of the functioning of this universe. So somebody who has that sense of spirituality, the sense of accountability to a power that is greater, a sense of gratitude at how small we are, a sense of wonder at our talents that we have and the beauty that surrounds us, and a sense of accountability, the wanting to make the world a better place. All this comes under the banner of spirituality to me. And and when you have somebody with kind of the same core spiritual values as you, it brings you that much closer in this world that is so separated by, we find reasons to separate ourselves: religion, caste, geography, education, socioeconomic status, like so many things. Imagine if you run into a person who does not look like anything you've ever imagined, but your spirits are alike. That is like the most amazing thing that can happen in a relationship, according to me. And the third one is common goals. Let's say um, the common goals are more important that glues two people together. Let's say one partner wants children and the other partner doesn't. It makes no sense for the two of you to be together. It's a relationship is not about trying to manipulate the other person into seeing from your point of view. If social status is important to one person and social service is important to the other, again, that's going to be a little bit of a divide. If getting rich is the goal for one person and the other person being relaxed and not having to work hard, that is the goal, that then those two are not going to match again. So find common goals, a lot of commonality. So if two people have independent spirituality and life views that are similar, they can be having a wonderful relationship. Now, on the flip side of this, what do you think are the biggest relationship liabilities? Jharna?
I'm going to read this out because I've written it down.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah. So the first thing is self-sacrifice.
Oh, how dare you! Stop! Stop! This I considered my fucking superpower. Oh, no, stop.
I can write a book on this.
Oh,
I think all of us can.
oh God. Oh, Jharna is like, Jharna is throwing some serious bombs in this vlog, isn't she? Like,
Yeah.
oh God. Okay, I'm not going to like this, but go ahead. I'm,
I,
I'm
I
having
don't think
chills.
there's too much to explain about self-sacrifice. We think we're amazing people because we're
Oh,
self-sacrificing, and that's exactly why we're shitty people when we self-sacrifice.
ouch! I'm in physical pain now because this was my asset. This is what I brought into a relationship, my ability to sacrifice myself. Shit. Never again. Oh God. You're going to go into point number two, Jharna?
Oh,
Let
this is
me
not
brace
done.
myself.
Yeah,
Oh
basically
shit.
being self-sacrificing and being a martyr. I think it's all almost on the same page. I self-sacrifice for you, so you have to love me and see how good of a person I am. And I think all of us have done that at some point. And I cannot remember a time when I was a more unbearable person.
Oh, and forget it. Even when you're not unbearable, I know we're concentrating on the humorous that part of it, but imagine when you're self-sacrificing and the other person is a kind of like a gotten used to and turned into a
Mm,
parasite and taking what you are giving from your resources as granted, right?
mm,
It's such a sucky dynamic.
yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
my poor
So
heart. Yeah.
I think we all know about self-sacrifice, so we're not going to have to elaborate so much on it.
Thank
Another
you.
thing is holding the other person hostage to make our dreams and aspirations come true.
Yes.
Um, because we project what we want onto the other person, and we somehow feel that if we're attracted to someone, we need to act on that attraction. And when you act on that attraction, you see that you have this weird story in your head. And if you are open enough, you'll realize it at some point. Otherwise, you're going to be in denial all your life, thinking that this is not the person that I chose to be with. He was somebody else and he turned into something else. But all the while, it's the story that's playing in your head about what you wanted this person to be. So, holding someone hostage to make your dreams come true is too much pressure on the other person, but it does so much damage to your self esteem. It does so much damage to you in where you don't realize, you start to believe that you're not good for anything, and you can't bring anything to the table, and then it just goes into a downward spiral unless you say, I'm not going to project this onto somebody else and I'm going to take responsibility for my life. So that is also a big liability. It's just too much of that crushed feeling when you bring this particular dynamic into your relationship. And the last thing is parenting your partner
Oh
to
God.
stop avoiding it, to stop looking at your own issues.
Jharna, you're on some kind of like emotional steroids today. Oh,
So,
I,
I
I,
mean,
I need to lie down. I need to lie down. Oh, I
we
need to
have
lie down.
we have parents, our partners have parents. We don't need to become their parents and they ours, because that's just a very icky relationship.
Oh, Jesus, have mercy on me.
And the
Oh,
fact that if people choose to become parents, already there's so much underlying issue that they're not addressing.
God.
I can't. I can't do this vlog anymore. Oh, I'm
I
in so
think
much
I was
pain.
in my previous relationship. I was trying to be this mother. I don't know why. It's like so wrong in every way. It's in every imaginative way. It is so wrong. You know.
It doesn't bode well.
Yeah, and it was so weird, and it's like literally mothering. Oh, did you
I,
do this? Did you do that? And I'm like,
oh,
oh God, like
but
yeah,
this is the weird thing, right? We're brought up in a weird sort of a culture that edifies self-sacrifice and mothering, and not mothering, that nurturing instinct.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
nurture this fully grown, functioning adult.
You know, I've
Why?
actually heard mothers say this about their son. I
Oh.
just hope that some girl will come and take care of him. What?
Why?
You're a 30-year-old man.
And if you need somebody to take care of you, you're a fucking failure to thrive. You need to die and not propagate the species. I'm so sorry for being harsh, but I think I'm feeling very defensive about everything that Jharna just said. Oh, God. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my three biggest
Oh,
liabilities.
thank you. Thank you for just finishing because it was just too much. Oh, God. Abhi, be kind, please. Okay.
I
What
think
other
Abhi is
thing?
also
I'm
going to
so
drop
scared
bombs
right now.
next.
Yeah,
I am
no,
so.
I'm just going to, I think, just said what Jarna said in different words. I'm going to say it. Probably it's not going to hit so badly like Jarna just said. She
Yes,
just
the way
used
she said
two.
it was
She
just
used
too much.
you. Yeah, you used two words, and I suddenly felt like, you just slapped me with all my
What did I
memories.
say?
You,
But
you just take some rest, Jarna. Like, don't talk anymore for a while. I'm
so
sorry.
I'm going to like probably give a toned down version of probably what you was been
Please.
telling me.
Yes.
So my liabilities will be firstly if it's an unresolved you in the relationship. Clearly, if you haven't found yourself, known yourself, I don't think you must have even known what your issues are. So not resolved your issues, not resolved your traumas, not resolved, and I think majority of the people they get into a relationship because they think that the other person is going to resolve their issues for
I
them.
know. I know. I did. Yeah.
So I don't know. You only don't know your issues. How the other person is going to magically figure it out, right?
Because we're
And
so busy wearing a mask and perfecting this facade, aren't we?
yes.
Yeah.
So I think unresolved you is. I also see that a lot of people, one relationship ends, they just have to get into another relationship, and
Yes.
I think that's because they know that they have issues and they're too scared to face them, and they will face them when they're having this alone time, when they're not with somebody during that time. So what do? You have to sit with yourself and probably fight. All these things is going to come and hit you hard. So that's why they jump from one relationship to another. Yes, Jarna?
Oh no,
But the
Jana's going to
truth is,
speak.
Abhi,
Sorry. Okay. I'm feeling so scared right now.
so even if a person has been in a relationship and decides to take a break and not date for a while, unless they actually actively make that time count for something, they're going to end up in a same kind of
True.
relationship.
Yeah, true.
So time is not exactly a factor, it's what you do with the
What
time that
you do.
makes a
I
difference.
agree. I completely agree.
Yes.
Even if you have the time, people don't make use of the time. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, unresolved you. Secondly, I already mentioned this. I think dependency. You do not have to be a dependent in the relationship. If you are going to be dependent, well, yeah, that's it. It's going to tank, and you're going to be flooded with insecurity. You're going to be flooded with your expectations being let down, and I don't think you should blame anybody for that. So, liability. Third, weak self-esteem. So I think these are all some points. So your self-esteem is so low, you are somehow wanting that to be lifted up by the other person, or this relationship should do that for you, is fucking messed up.
Mm.
So nobody, no other person is going to lift your self-esteem up. You got to do it yourself. You need to find your self-esteem and lift it up. That's it.
But this is the problem in the society these days, isn't it? Because low self esteem masquerades as humility, as shyness, being a little bit of an introvert. So when low self esteem masquerades as these romantic terms, and society has a kind of like a respect for it, now, I think most people with low self esteem need to fail a few times and hit rock bottom a few times before they realize that they have low self esteem. And it's not shyness, it's not humility, it's not being an introvert, it's that you are, well, kind of low inside your own esteem of yourself.
Another quick reference would be if you find narcissism or an inferiority complex lurking in your relationship. Of course,
Oh,
if
wow.
you are narcissist or you are not going to realize it
Mm.
clearly because you're so caught up in your own web of narcissism. If you have a partner who is narcissistic, I'm sure it's very difficult to tell from the beginning. It will You will be a lot into the relationship before you will start realizing how you're a narcissistic partner, and that's the problem with that. I think I, it's very difficult to find out because narcissistic people, I think, they are so glamorous, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yes.
So yeah, to have a narcissistic partner or you yourself are a very narcissistic person is one of the biggest liabilities of a relationship. Next, second last point is ignoring red flags, which
Ah,
we all do. I did,
oh, God.
and these red flags can be very individualistic. It can be different from, of course, different for different people. What these red flags could be. So, quick example. Just a month ago or something, I met a guy and he told me he's a banker, but he was working the graveyard shift. So, so the red flag did rise in my mind, and I was like, "What bank is working graveyard shift? Which bank is that?" And I could never get an answer.
Yeah.
Maybe the bank will drop a comment on this vlog, who knows?
So, and every time I spoke with him, my subconscious brain would be holding like a placard, banker, banker, banker,
Right.
and I'd be like, okay, I will talk about this someday. But you know what? Yeah, this is one of the examples. So these red flags can be different for different people. If you think you're spotting a red flag, which is too big of a flag to ignore, like a profession or a behavior, or they have said some lies and which you have caught, or something like that. So too big of a flag to ignore. Ignore the person, ignore that
Yes.
relationship. These red
Red
flags are
flags. Red flags are deal breakers.
deal
Let's
breakers,
just call them that. There's
and
no red
especially
flags and deal breakers. Right.
yeah, and especially if these red flags are in conflict with your ideology, with your how you conceptualize your life, like your core beliefs. If it's in collision with it, if the red flag is
Ah.
really against it, just there is no thinking. You just have to drop this relationship because there is no going about it.
And
Mm.
also, when there
Brutal.
are red flags, our body tends to respond more than our mind does.
Oh God, yes.
And
Oh my
Yes.
God,
sometimes when you
yes.
feel an instinct and you just know that you know, but you still go ahead and choose to ignore it. So that's something we need to look out for as well.
That
Mm.
I did it and I used to feel very clenched. So
Oh
I think
God.
a very
Oh.
common response to a red flag situation. And last but not the least, that's what Jharna has said as the first point. So I'll conclude with that: compromising and sacrificing.
Mm.
So I won more races.
Woo! Yeah.
There is no compromise. You don't have to compromise in a relationship. You don't have to sacrifice in a relationship. These are not mega serials. These are not Bollywood movies of the 1980s. This is your fucking life. Nobody is compromising. Nobody is sacrificing. So get that. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
my
Thank
life.
you.
Liabilities.
I'm so glad the both of you emphasized this quality of self-sacrifice, which is so edified in especially in my household. And I don't know whether I can say it without sounding like a complete asshole, but I grew up thinking my value as a woman depended on my ability to self sacrifice. And if there was a woman who seized her power and didn't compromise, I looked down on her in a way. Um, and I feel ashamed of it now. To have been brought up as sort of saying that your value is being a sacrificial lamb. I have to sacrifice myself in the altar of a relationship, um, did the greatest amount of damage to my psyche. So thank you guys for emphasizing that self-sacrifice is not an asset. It's a huge liability. The cost is too great to ever pay for a relationship. You can be single and happy. But then, if you are coming from a background of low achievement, of lack of goals, a lack of vision for your own life, all you have is your energy to sacrifice again. So, first of all, fall in love with yourself, do esteemable things because esteemable people do esteemable things, like Shalon Lester loves to say. Independent people do independent things. Worthy people do worthy things. Creative people do creative things. Nice people do nice things. Do things. Let your actions speak. Do not live in your own head and postpone life and keep thinking that, oh, when I'm in a relationship, I'm going to do this, and put so much pressure into this concept of a relationship that when the reality of the relationship arrives, you are just a mess waiting to happen. So I don't know what I'm going to add to as the biggest liabilities, but I've just finished reading this amazing book called The Four Agreements. Thank you, Jharna, for recommending that book. Thank you so much. But one of the amazing things that this book talks about is the flow of energy, right? We need to be in a relationship where we are filling ourselves with energy. Our partner is filling himself or herself with energy. And then both of us pour energy into the relationship. And then we can drink from that common pool where we've invested our personal brand of energy into. Unfortunately, with the history of self-sacrifice and holding someone hostage to my ability to be a martyr, I've always attracted people who were parasites, who took energy from me, leaving me with great emotional scars, would go off into the world using the energy that they took from me, feeling energized, and they would achieve things for themselves selfishly. And I would have nothing to show for it. In my last relationship, the guy would feel secure, independent, happy, safe, which is what I provided, and go out and hunt for other female attention, and then would come and tell me that all these women were looking at him, and what was I supposed to feel now, you know? So this act of self-sacrifice is your own self-sabotage. You are killing yourself. Nobody is going to respect you or love you for self-sacrificing. And quite frankly, if you're self-sacrificing, you're going to attract assholes into the relationship. So if you take one point from this vlog, beware of yourself. It's your biggest strength that you bring into a relationship is self-sacrifice, and beware, very wary of the person you've attracted into your life to form a relationship with, because that is a parasite, not a partner. So thank you guys so much that we've had this wonderful discussion.
Just
Yes,
a
Abhi.
point. If you're self-sacrificing, I think be very wary about your own self,
Oh God.
and
Yes.
more than you probably you probably are the parasite. Actually, here you're the self-sacrificing parasite,
Yeah. Hmm. And,
and
and and and there's nothing good going to come out of it, right? I mean, how can
it's
a
nothing.
deficit bring about a plenty? It's
Yeah.
just mathematically not possible. And so be very cogent, very coherent in your own mind. Be educated about where your energy is flowing. Be 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 conscious that if you've attracted into your life a partner who's constantly hurting you, and a vast majority of your energy reserve is going into healing yourself so that you can come up and he can hurt you again, and then your energy goes into healing yourself and you're constantly in that survival mode, what are you going to do? What are you going to contribute to the world? What are you going to do for your life? Imagine the horrible culture of self-sacrifice you're going to propagate into the next generation. You're going to tell the next generation, oh, look at me, making myself a human sacrifice every day is the greatest honor, which is the lesson, the damning lesson I learned, like we all learned. So never, never, never again. So if there's one point you take away from this vlog, I hope laying yourself on the altar of a relationship is not the way to go about having a healthy relationship. So I hope you get that point. And we've run a little bit longer than we planned. So we're going to cut our vlog here and come up with the next part in a couple of weeks' time. So in the time of Corona, keep safe, keep social distance, maintain a self quarantine, be responsible, because it's not just about us, it's about everybody else. And this is not self sacrifice. This is actually doing something for the community. Thank you so much, Abhi. Thank you so much,
Thank
Jharna, for
you.
being
Thank you.
wonderful. And let's meet up in another fortnight and continue with the topic. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.